Gabs, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Adam. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Fantastic.
I got some French fries, and I'm a little bit hungry. I know you're a little bit hungry as well.
French fries. Yes, yes. I haven't eaten today, so this looks delicious. This is fantastic. It looks wonderful.
So for people who may not be familiar with you, if you just want to introduce yourself.
I am Gabrielle Clark, and I am the founder of Affirming Reality. Yes. I help people parent their children into desistance from social transition. Like, what is that?
Well, if you want to explain a little bit more, go for it.
What is that? So if a parent has a school-age child who is identifying as something other than their natal sex, then I coach them on how to bring their child back into reality, objective reality, biological reality.
And of course, this stems from your personal experience with your daughter.
Sure. My daughter, she was identifying as trans after being indoctrinated at school, like so many of our children. And I was able to bring her back. Yeah, I created a program for her with a series of phases and steps to bring her out of it,
Right.
based on addiction behaviors and issues with cults, things like that. Studying those things helped me figure out how to bring her out.
It's very much a cult in its form.
Yeah.
People throw around cult all the time. But the things like taking someone who oftentimes in distress. I don't know about your daughter's situation, if she was in moments of distress or like distress as far as how a teenager sees distress.
If you're a teenage girl, you're just distressed all the damn time.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, if you're a teenager, you're going to experience distress, especially, 13, 14, tweens. At the beginning stages of puberty, yes, you're going to experience distress. So, but that's normal, and that's not a symptom of something bad or wrong in your body.
I mean, it's not.
No, it's not. Pimples are a thing, you get hair in weird places and all that stuff. Those are all things that are supposed to happen, your natural processes. So telling our children that there's something wrong with that is cult-like.
Yeah.
It does have, it's trying to encourage an unnatural behavior for a natural problem.
That's a very good way of putting it. The exploitation of kids and pushing them in this ideological framework, how they see themselves. I think that's like, especially during 2020, that was 2020 into 2021. That was a big wake-up call for a lot of parents as to what was happening in schools. The default trust that the schools are doing what they're supposed to do for the most part, and then seeing that actually they've been hiding things, treating your child completely differently than when they leave your house. I was actually speaking to a family out from Michigan, and their child was having issues, and they became friendly with the administrator. I think it was like a counselor who was helping them, and they, even spent time with their family as well. And lo and behold, that administrator was hiding that their child was transitioning. And they had no idea that this was even going on. They just thought their daughter was having some issues at school, like any other kid might have issues. But they were hiding their pronouns were changed. They were hiding they were transitioning. They were hiding all of these details. The only reason they found out was because in one of the documents from the school, they asked them to put he.
Right.
And And they were like, huh, that's weird. Why did they do that?
Right.
And then, that's when they end up finding out.
Well, all of us, everybody who has a child in school during the lockdowns came to the realization that our kids are not okay. There is something else going on. And I'm no different. I saw my daughter, what alerted me to how serious the situation was is that my daughter was in an art class and they were looking at the BLM riots, videos of the BLM riots. And the art teacher was calling the graffiti and all of this property damage and everything an expression, an artistic expression. These were tweens,
right?
And I'm like, graffiti is a crime. Why are they teaching this to me? Why are they telling my daughter that this is artistic expression? This is not an acceptable form of artistic expression.
Right.
And they're too young to understand what exactly that means or any consequences or implications because of it.
Right.
So I really took issue with that. And I went, to the administration, and they too were who I thought were our friends. I thought these people were looking out for us. They had been for years. And I thought we could trust them. But when I talked to my son to ask my son about what was going on in his class, that was when he told me that he was being asked to give his list his identities and attach the signifier of privileged or oppressed to those identities. And when I looked at that and I saw that, and he refused to do some of these exercises, and he told me about a situation where they were discussing this SpongeBob meme that said reverse racism doesn't exist or is a myth or something like that. And he said, anybody can be racist. Now, this is a white kid. Excuse me. I'm half Black and half white. My first husband was Black. My second husband was white. And so this is my 3/4 white son that they're saying that Black people cannot be racist against white people. To my son who has a Black mother. You know what I mean? Like, it was just such a bizarre thing. And he said, well, anybody can be racist. And that turned into a big deal. And when we went to the school, they wouldn't allow him to leave that class. It turned into a much bigger deal. We ended up filing the first federal lawsuit against CRT indoctrination because of that. This was before all of the stuff happened with my daughter with the trans ideology. So both of my children were indoctrinated in school, one by CRT and one by SEL.
It sounds like your son had more pushback, I guess, would you say?
Well, I would say that my son was a senior in high school. Okay. He wasn't a 13-year-old, right. You know what I mean? He was a senior in high school. And, like, I don't really, my daughter is like, I don't want to, we left it. We're out of it. We're done with it. Let's move on. But my son, we didn't have that option. We didn't have the option to just walk away. He was planning on going to college. We were invested in this. We couldn't just walk away from this situation. And they were threatening to fail him. And that would have prevented him from graduating. So we had to do something.
That's why I think the education for parents, like what you're doing, you're educating parents, but especially beforehand, like when I was aware of all these things that were going on, I started having conversations with my son, and I said, if something seems funny, at school.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were watching like Ben Shapiro videos and stuff like that. And I never like told him what to think.
Right.
I would just present stuff to him. We watch all types of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he can see the silliness and the stuff that was happening.
Sure.
And my son's very much so like me. He's very logical. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I was like, listen, if you see something funny going on at school, just tell me.
Right.
And there was a couple things that happened, but one in particular was some consulting company, I can't remember the name of it, some consulting company came in and gave this sheet out to all the kids asking, what do they identify? What's their sexual orientation? All these things. And I was like,
that's when you should have said, that's when you should have sued their drawers off.
Because that's exactly what we did.
Mm.
That was the exact same scenario.
Yeah.
They were asking my son to list his identities and then attach the signifier of privileged or oppressed to those identities. Now, on the surface, my son, white, male, Judeo-Christian value home.
Mm-hmm.
His father was a lawyer, all of that stuff. So on the surface, according to this, to this exercise, he would have just been privileged all the way down the line.
Mm.
Except my husband died when he was only 1 year old.
Mm.
I was in a wheelchair for several years. We lost everything. We were living in a motel. And he was sleeping on a mat on the floor. There's nothing privileged about that life, no matter what color your skin is, no matter who your God is. If you are living that life, there is nothing privileged about that.
Yeah. A lot of people can't understand, because like sometimes when you talk about economic class, it can come off like very communist.
Mm-hmm.
Because the communists
Sure.
talk about different classes.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something there. There's always like a little bit of truth when it comes to what leftists say or even communists say.
Well, it couldn't work otherwise, right?
Right, exactly. And I think there are a lot of people who push this stuff who've never been uncomfortable like what you just described.
No.
Like, I don't really talk about it, but like, I remember the first time my mother cried. Like that, I remember, and she cried in front of us. My mother was getting evicted.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting evicted as a family,
Right.
and she found a place, gave them the money. They took the money and left.
Mm.
That's all the money she had. So they were putting our stuff on the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my mother crying. And that day felt like the longest day because we had to take all that stuff and put it in a storage unit. And then we went to a homeless shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that experience. And we were there for, I want to say a few months. But I still remember, like I can still picture all
Right.
these things.
We've been days from homeless, like we've been hours
Mhm.
from having to be in a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
And I know, like my relationships with my sons may never repair because of some really bad decisions that I made.
Mm.
But when you're in that moment, you don't always know the exact right thing to do. You know what I mean? So for somebody to reduce you down to a sort of social class or have some sort of status or privilege
Mm-hmm.
based on immutable characteristics or your worldview even is just, it's arrogant.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting. And I was infuriated because I felt like my kids had been through enough. And now you're gonna sit there and, take this attitude that somehow he's more privileged than the other children in this house, or in the other children in the school who have both parents who they have cars. We were riding the bus, and I didn't have a nice wheelchair or one of those motorized scooter jobs. I had a big old 50-pound hospital chair that some organization gave us. And we were living on the second floor. And we were living in Vegas. I would be sitting in pools of my own sweat at the end of the day. There's nothing privileged about that life.
Yeah.
It's insane. And, you know, there is an arrogant, classism when we're discussing this. And, you know, and if people want to call it, communist for somebody to say that, I'm sorry, but, you know, one of the reasons why J.D. Vance has become, so important for regular people is because that's too many people's reality. Too many. That hillbilly elegy stuff, you know, there are too many people in America who know somebody or who that has happened to, or they, you know what I mean? They've seen that story before. I mean, both you and I have experienced either being the mother or having that mother, right? And having to deal with that life. And people are like, some of the people I've heard, you know, I've heard them say, well, why did they pick J.D. Vance? That's why. Because with crack and meth and, what other kind of nonsense that big businesses have done to families, you know, the housing bubble bursting or Enron or whatever, and people lose everything. And this is what happens.
Yeah.
And too many people have that story.
No, you're absolutely right. I think even like the ideological stuff that gets pushed on kids, the repeat pattern that I see is that it often comes from the most affluent Americans in this country. The people who get it the most come from the top schools, whether it be top private schools, top top universities. And then you look at all these people who go to liberal arts schools. Well, guess where they're going? They're becoming teachers, administrators, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they enter the world from these institutions. They enter the world, and they are disproportionately influential in our lives.
Sure.
You know, one of the reasons why I was like, actually, one of the reasons why I started writing just in general was because I was tired of the narrative coming from these elitists who are in our media.
Right.
Who were saying that how you and I interact with people, it's really through this lens. And the people we're around, they really see you as this. And it's just like, but you look at their lives, they don't live their life like that.
Yeah.
That's what, like the Black wealthy leftists who say this stuff, the Black academics and all that stuff, for them to be like, white people are inherently bad and all this other stuff. They marry interracially. They live in white majority neighborhoods. You know, all their colleagues and friends are white. And I was like, you know, for someone who, if I went around and said, these people are the devil, and I'm just hanging out with them when we cool.
Right.
Like, you really think they're the devil? And that's
you know, your friend is the devil, right? You said, you told me.
You
told me.
I'm hanging out with him. What? He's cool. He's not like all the others, right? I'm sure they tell themselves.
Different.
He's different. Exactly. That's the favorite phrase of racists when they're inconsistent.
Right.
But it's that kind of thing where I'm just like, hold up. This guy is on television, has a net worth way beyond mine, and is telling everybody that people who have my skin complexion are not privileged.
Right.
People who do have who have the opposite, who are white, are privileged. So they have just automatically. So they're So they're better than me? Is that what you're trying to say? And I have a, call me crazy, but I have a problem when someone says someone inherently is better than you in our society for whatever reason. And I think this is the kind of thing that pisses me off about the whole, what I call them Karens for Kamala.
Right. Catch a bubble. I cannot. If I, man.
Take a beat.
Got it. Like that chick, man. I wish. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's the most, but if you really look at like the screenshot of all those women who are on there.
Sure.
Wealthiest white women that exist in our society.
Yeah.
All progressive women, Mega Rapinoe and all these other, and that woman apparently has millions of followers.
If I knew that you could get 1 million followers by talking down to people like their children,
yeah,
I would have done that years ago. Because let me tell you, if I had to listen to that nonsense every day, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what kind of person wants to sit and listen to that every day. You know, I mean, I'm a coach and my clients are like, wow, you're really honest. I'm like, yeah, because this is real life. You know, catch a bubble, bitch, you know? You know, I don't know. I couldn't, I could not listen to that nonsense. But you're right. I mean, those are the kinds of people who are, number one, telling us that we're less than and they're better than, and they need to tone down their awesomeness so that we can shine brightly.
Right.
You know, get the...
We need to use our privilege. And they're like, I spoke with a BIPOC woman and she said, it's your turn. So we're answering the call. It's like, man, and that's what they do. They always accuse us of, you only saying that because white conservative. It's like, no, I say that because that's what I actually believe.
Yeah.
But for these people, they always have a validation for what they're saying, because some idiotic Black leftist who lives in the best of neighborhoods, who's been indoctrinated just like the rest of them, who thinks they're better than everybody else, said, well, you should do this for us. And they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for confirming that I need to do these things for you. Because I'm a victim.
I'm going to take that and I'm going to sit with it.
Right. Right.
Man,
take a beat.
Get out. Get out. I can't. But I mean, and when they, you know, it's like, oh, you're just self-hating, blah, blah, blah. I'm a lifelong conservative. I've never voted for a Democrat.
So that means you've hated yourself your entire life.
The entire time, the whole time. Like, no, I mean, you know, anybody who knows me knows that there's just some fundamental truths. Like, I'm not going to cater to anybody else's delusion, and I'm not going to let myself off the hook either. And so that whole self-hating thing, it's just lazy. But those kinds of women won't even talk to me. They won't even engage with me at all. Because in their mind, you know, they can't dispute me, because then that would be wrong. But also it gets them off the hook from having to answer for their foolishness.
Yeah, I don't. If you're talking about white leftists who say stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, you know.
I think they're all hilarious.
You know what? I spend a lot of time with radical feminists, and some of them are half in and half out. Right? And I'll be like, what? What are we talking about?
Yeah. I've seen that where all like They were like, all right, I'm feeling you. And then they just go into cult jargon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where the fuck did that come from?
The solidarity. It's just like, I mean, we run into it. We run into a lot in the pro reality space because there are a lot of.
Is that what it's called? Pro reality?
That is what I have named it. Right. The fury of turban. You know, we needed a better. TERFs.
Okay.
TERFs. They're the plural of TERFs is turban. And when they gather, it's a fury. Okay. Like, so we have the fury of turban spaces on Thursdays on X. And, you know, I just didn't like gender critical because I'm not rape critical or murder critical.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I didn't like the term gender critical. I'm like, I'm not critical of gender. I don't believe that exists at all. Like, I don't think that's a thing. So I'm pro reality.
I like it.
And so that's what I call it, pro reality. You know, reality is my anchor. Like, that's where I'm sitting, you know, and I'm immovable on that point. So, you know, that's how I hold it together.
That makes sense. I've heard team reality.
Team reality. I mean, yeah. I mean, my organization is called Affirming Reality Connected. So the community that I've built around the pro reality movement is Affirming Reality Connected. And so I feel like you can't get any more plain than that. There's no other word to describe it accurately.
Right.
There's no other word that can encompass it better. It's reality. We live in objective reality.
Yes. I think that's the big thing is getting people. I think there are things that are just so objective that they're obvious. Even tiny children can see it.
Right. Like boys have a penis, girls have a vagina type thing. Like.
Exactly.
While all of the gender critical people are arguing about how can you know, definitively what do they call it? What do they say? Distinguish what is male and what is female. Like, why do we need to do all of that extra? I mean, with the gametes and the X and the chromosomes and whatnot. Can't you just have any and outie? Like, can't you just do it like that?
I think that's the one area where people who I agree with and who agree with us, I think it's a mistake to go down that line.
I do too.
Of gametes and this and that. I'm just like, stop it. Like, the whole point is that it's obvious.
Right. It is obvious.
It's just obvious.
Yeah. That's why, and I tell them all the time, I'm like, seriously, you know how you determine the sex of a person? I've done it in utero 5 times. Every time a baby is growing inside my body, all 5 times, they said, do you want to determine the sex now on this visit when they do the ultrasound? That's how they frame it. Excuse me. And if you can see it through my belly button and say definitively, that's a girl or that's a boy, that's all you need. You know, anything else is, you know, an abnormality, you know.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
What about intersex people?
With the intersex, okay? You know, I mean, I think, and you know what? I went back and looked at a lot of 90s television shows and early 2000s television shows. And like every one of those dramatic series had some intersex, you know, episode.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I watched House, and House had this intersex episode where the girl looked like the perfect girl. model, everything. But she was sick. And what they determined was that she was actually male. She had male chromosomes and gonads that had not descended or some such nonsense, right?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, sure. 1 in a billion. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to change the entire language for a single.
We have to make we have to make
it a safe space
for our intersex friends.
No, I mean, we don't call them the sickle cell blacks. Okay, they just black. Okay, we don't call them, we don't call them the diabetes blacks. You know what I mean? Like, there's no segregation for other kinds of illnesses.
Maybe we should call them sickle cell blacks. It sounds so messed up.
I don't think we should. I think we should just leave it like it do.
There go one of them sickle cell blacks up there.
I mean, like, that's a serious condition, okay?
Right.
But we don't change the entire, we don't change the entire language just for this distinction, just for this problem. It's not a feeling, okay? It's an abnormality. And there are them. One of my nephews was born with 12 toes. Like,
I think
it
you need to put toes under question now.
Under questioning, I've got it. I'm toe gender. I'm toe gender. No, no, you don't get to. That's foolishness. And I think that all of the academics, the academians who are getting all smartified, all up in their, all up in their Twitter feeds, trying to, determine sex with the gametes and the X chromosomes and the Y. And, what about Angela's? What was her name? Not Angela Salinas. It's not Angela Salinas. The one who wrote the Feminist Manifesto or whatever.
Oh, I can't remember.
I can't remember her name. The crazy one who tried to kill Andy Warhol.
You gotta be specific.
She tried to kill Andy Warhol. Yeah. And her idea, the idea was that men were incomplete because they were missing that last little leg on their chromosome. Yeah, that men were just incomplete women.
That type of stuff reminds me of how Nazis would talk about Jews.
Yeah.
Like,
isn't that
they're
insane?
defective people.
Right.
And you always see that. That's why I break it down to hate. Is this hate? Not in the sense of like hate where it makes sense, not the new definition of hate. Because
right.
You say something I don't like.
Then that's hate. Yeah.
Then that's hate. I'm saying hate from a sense of complete disdain for an individual by their existence.
Sure.
Not because that individual did something, but you hate that group. And so far that you'll believe falsehoods about that group.
Sure. To
validate your hate even more, or to even strengthen your hate.
Like, I hate skinny people. I'm just kidding, skinny people. Don't be in my DMs, which is no, I know what you mean though.
But that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Like when I hear something like that, where feminists might say something like
sure.
that, they're just incomplete
men.
People. Yeah, just like,
they're incomplete women. Yeah.
Right.
Well, she was nuts anyway.
Well, yeah, she was nuts.
But those look, but I think that speaks to a broader point. Like, so all of the conceptualizing and intellectualizing and all of that stuff gets us into a stupid place.
Yeah.
Like you started out, making some good points, and then you just swoop back on down to stupid again. Like I feel like, when we live in a society where we don't, just recognize what's common sense and just leave it at that, know. I think, and to me, the proof is that all of this stuff came from universities where people just sit around and think up shit. right? And then they try to make it fit into everyday life, and take it out of the theoretical context and put it into practical reality, which it doesn't always work.
Right.
You know, and I understand, why they would want to, but when we're talking about human behavior or human interactions, or the value of a person's life, or how a person identifies throughout their life, that shouldn't be quantified in some classroom of assholes just thinking I'm shit.
I can't remember.
Sorry, academics.
I can't remember who said it, but I don't know if it was Thomas Sowell or someone said this, and I'm paraphrasing, that there are some ideas that are so dumb that only an academic would believe it.
Sure. Absolutely.
That's exactly what I feel like I've been seeing, especially since 2020, but even beyond that, where I'm just like, the only way you can believe that is if you live in a bubble of other people who believe such stupidness.
Right.
And that's exactly what they live. Like when you deal with certain academics, they don't have a regular job.
Right.
Like,
this is their job.
This is their job. Yeah. And they're around other people who are academics as well. And especially if you deal with the ones who come from upper middle class and above.
Sure.
They're like in this weird bubble where they never experience, the type of stuff that we've experienced.
Sure.
They probably never had a real job. They had to interact with people of different economic classes and backgrounds and so on. They've just been like funneled into this educational world where it's small and it's just a bubble of thinking and how they approach things and confirmation bias.
Right.
And then you come from a background, I'm not saying you, but like, let's say you're someone who comes from a background, working class background. You're like, I'm the first in my family to go to college. You go to college and they say some asinine bullshit.
Right.
Now, either you match it up with how you were raised and the people you were around, and like, that doesn't sound like reality.
Right.
Or you say, well, listen, they're my professors, so they must be smarter than me.
Right.
And
I think too much of that. I think too much of the latter happens.
Yeah.
Honestly. I think, you get to college and they allow their superiors to become their betters.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's how we ended up in this place. I'm guilty of it myself. I was married to a lawyer. My late husband was a lawyer. And I was like, well, we should let all of the smart people. That was when I was young and stupid, though. Because, the very smart people, and the very smart people can't know what it is like to have to decide whether or not you buy athlete's foot cream or you buy bread. Because you gotta go to work tomorrow, and you're hurting, but you're also hungry.
Right.
So what do? Like if you've never had to make those kinds of decisions, do you really even know what real life is like? Really? You know what I mean? And this is one of the things that I talk about with my parents. I say, let me tell you guys something. All of our kids have grown up very spoiled. Most children now have never been truly afraid. That's something that we see on TV or something that's far away.
Right.
And so when we think about when that does happen, most people don't even understand it in the way in its the fullness of the gravity of it, the whole of it.
Right. You're right. I think That's why I'm glad I did write the book and my son read it. For one, not a lot of kids don't really get an insight into what their parents went through.
Right.
You know, maybe they hear stories, but they never really hear it in depth
Sure.
as to what they went through. But the other thing was for my son to appreciate what he has,
Right.
because my son never was homeless. He didn't have to go through the things I went through as a kid like that. But he also has a father.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to experience like, does my father care about me?
Right.
Does he love me? I need some advice, but I don't know how to reach him and he doesn't reach out to me.
Right.
You know, so he realized that, and he told me. He told me, he's like, I see how much I have in comparison to what you went through as a kid. And it made him more appreciative of that as well. So I think that's one area where we're really missing these days is humility.
Sure.
We give our kids, but we never set them up to understand that you can't get everything.
Right.
And then when they don't get it, they're distraught.
Right.
And you know what? I can't blame them. I can't blame them. If you raise your kids, like there's a study I wrote about Gen Z. They're the worst in the workplace.
Right.
And we got all these stories about Gen Z doing this and doing that. And I hear you, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But then I also said in an article, who raised them?
Right.
Right? They didn't wake up one day entitled. They were created
taught that way. Yes.
They were taught this way. And so my son is not entitled. My son is like, oh, I got a hole in my shoe. It can wait.
Right.
You know, he's like that because that's how we raised him.
Right.
To understand that you can't always get what you want. You should appreciate the things that you have. And you know what? You work hard to get the things that you do want. And that's what he's doing. Now he's 18.
You want to go tell my sons? No, my sons are good boys. They're going to have that. They're going to write that same book in 20 years.
Yeah.
About me. That scares me.
But you know what? Like in my book, you read it. I criticize my mom. I criticize my father, but I do it from a place of love.
I understand. Like I joke about it, but at the same time, I'm just like, man, they got a lot to be mad about. Yeah. And I think that our parents, like I'm 47. My parents would never have admitted their fault in any bad upbringing.
Right.
And their parents either.
Right.
And now I'm saying, you know what, I made a lot of mistakes. I make mistakes every day. Even with my own kid. And thank God I only have one left. I'm looking for a husband. Oh, silly.
But I think it's important to give grace to our parents as well. Like even as much as I talk about my father, I don't hate my father. He passed away. But I don't hate him. The most emotion that I have is disappointment.
Right.
And even for my mother is not perfect, but there are a lot of good things about my mother. And as I've gotten older, I've become less critical of my mother as well, because I get it.
Right.
And so that's one thing I would hope for your kids as they get older. It's very easy to be young and inexperienced and never have to deal with a difficult decision.
Yeah.
And yes, we are responsible for the decisions we make.
Sure.
But life is hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a crapshoot and you're like, I'm just going to do this and it doesn't work out. And you like, gosh, shit, it didn't work out. But, you try, as long as your intentions are good and you're trying your best, I think for the most part, our kids are willing to accept that. Now, the entitled kids, you know, they're the ones who are like, yeah, well, my life wasn't perfect.
All right.
It's like,
I see that a lot. I see that a lot.
yeah.
I mean, you know, especially with the whole gender stuff, even with the children that, you know, have desisted or the detransitioners, even with them, you know, like they slowly come into the realization that, oh shit, everything does not revolve around me. I mean, it is jarring. It's jarring. We as parents, you know, need to start doing a better job about making sure that our children understand that they're not, that the world doesn't know them anything.
Right.
And to make sure that they're not raising their children to be entitled by just doing every single, you know, every single thing and giving, you know, every little whim, satisfying every little whim, or, you know, all of that stuff. But with all of this gender stuff, you really do see it. Like, I mean, you know, you look at these TikToks and all of these, you know, they, thems, you know, and they've, you know, got their boobs and their mustache and they're out there, you know what I mean? And they're like, don't misgender me, you know, and you're just like, honey, when I was growing up, people used to call me all kinds of names. My last name is Higginbotham. That's my maiden name. Do you know what they did with that one?
Yeah.
And you're mad because somebody called you a she? I mean, you got boobs, honey. And, you know, so it's like, we understood that the world didn't owe us anything,
Right.
you know, and, you know, I'm a Gen Xer. We had no guidance at all. We were feral, you know, come home when the street lights, you know, come on, and drinking out of hoses and all that whole stuff, riding in the back of trucks, just, you know, mudding in the back of a pickup truck, you know. We didn't have every single thing at our fingertips like our children do now.
Yeah.
And we were better for it, but we're the ones who raised these kids too. So, I mean, I think our upbringing, this was inevitable because we didn't have all of these great, wonderful things, and we do want to make it easier for our kids. And I think a lot of us don't realize the detriment that we're doing by making every single thing easy for our children.
I think there is something about humans having a struggle.
Sure.
And if you wipe away all the struggle, they're going to find some sort of struggle out of something. Sure. So, you know, if you're going to struggle, if you're going to have something, let it be something that actually can develop your character.
Sure.
You know, when people talk about, like, you know, they're 20-something years old and they're broke, I'm like, sounds about right.
Yeah.
You know, life's a struggle.
Sure.
I was 20-something years old and broke too. And you got to figure it out. But I'm glad I was. Like, I was homeless as an adult. And some people helped me out by putting me in a hotel room for a couple months. But I wouldn't change any of that. Like, I think about that stuff now, that I'm not check to check, that I have a nice place, that I have a nice car. All these things I feel like were, one, tests in my life. And they made me stronger for today. And I think sometimes people think that adversity makes you weaker.
Yeah.
And it actually makes you stronger. And I always say, like, I like being around people who've been through some shit.
All right.
Because they're the best people to be around.
Yeah.
Because one, they appreciate stuff.
They're thoughtful.
They're thoughtful.
They're not going to be rude for no reason, or, you know,
Or they're just like, I guess the other way of looking at it is they're not scared.
Right.
Like when people, like, if I get those hate DMs, don't bother me whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't.
Don't bother me whatsoever. Like people who are worried about getting canceled. For one, I know that the possibility of someone getting canceled is pretty slim.
Right.
But they're so afraid of that horror story that they saw
Right.
online that
Yeah.
it's going to happen to them, and it makes them scared. And for me, I'm like, man, I've been check to check,
You know,
homeless,
yeah,
all this stuff. I lose my job, I find
Yeah.
another job. Like,
That whole thing, that's one of the things that has been the hardest about being in the pro reality fight, is because there are so many people who are like, I'm going to get doxxed. And I'm just like, I have crap mailed to me on the rigs. Like, get over yourself. No, like everybody needs to be in this. Like,
Right.
you need to be invested in this because this is about you too. Or I'll get DMs from women who are like, can you figure this out and fix this for me? No, bitch, you go and fix it. Like, I had to do it too. So, you're gonna have to, put your big girl panties on and come on, let's go. And it's really tough for a lot of people though, especially people who have been so careful to stay within their bounds, within their boundaries. They've been so careful to stay under the radar and, not, they're the people at their job. They don't discuss it. They don't know about their beliefs. They don't have, they're towing the company line, whatever it is.
right.
Right. But that's how you get this nonsense like at John Deere or Harley Davidson or Planet Fitness. That's how you get that nonsense, And I think, it's time. It's time for people to just get over themselves because really, if we don't do something, we're all going to be qualified authors who can go out and talk about how they've been through some shit, because we're all going to end up going through some real shit if we don't start, taking care of the situation as it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we live in, this is why I'm an advocate for traveling abroad.
Yeah.
We live in the most fortunate society.
Yeah.
Today, let's just say today. We live in the most fortunate society. There's a reason why we immigrate the most people in the world. They want to come here because they see that there's something special about living in this country.
Sure.
Not many people are knocking on the door of North Korea for a reason, right? Or Cuba, right? So there's something that's special here. But I think it's a bit of spoiledness that exists here that people can't recognize it. And I'm not just pointing fingers. Like, there have been moments in my life where I felt that way too.
Oh yeah, I'm deeply ashamed of myself for everything I've ever done. Because I'm like, you know what? There are people out in the world who they would die. They would kill to be in your position.
Yeah.
And you're throwing a temper tantrum about whipped cream. Come on.
Yeah. And listen, I get it. Where you live, you're a product of where you're from.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think that it's good to have a wider perspective on what's going on. That's why I like talking to people. I talk to people who immigrated to this country. I've been abroad and talked to people, even in countries where we think, oh, it's just like America. It's like, no, it's not. Like when you, like I've been to Germany multiple times and made friends out there and had discussions with like taxi drivers are some of the best people you could talk to. And I'm just like, they give you the 411 as to what life is really like here.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah. Couldn't deal.
No. Like there was one guy I was talking to, his taxi driver. And he was saying how in Germany, one, they tax you to death. But there's a point where you get taxed there's a point where you get taxed so much that it's not worth working more.
Right.
And so if that's the case, then everyone kind of just stops at that point. And I'm like, so there's like this constructed mediocrity,
Ah.
right? And even the jobs, because I saw this, full disclosure, at one point I was thinking about going to Germany and then apply to jobs and stuff like that. But I remember just like doing research. Doctors out there don't make that much.
Right.
You know, in comparison to here, you become a millionaire doctor.
Don't they have like socialized everything though too?
So in Germany, they have where everyone is supposed to have health insurance.
Right.
Now they have public and private
Sure.
that you can buy into. Most people buy into the public. And it's not just like one public. They have like a million different
Right.
types of public plans. But most people buy into the public. So it's technically something that you're legally supposed to have, and two, the public option competes with the
Is
private.
it like our Social Security system here? Kind of?
No, because Social Security just automatically takes it.
Right.
You have no choice.
Right.
But with them, like let's say there's plan A through Z, you can choose which
one. Okay.
in the public sector, or you can go in the private sector and choose.
Well, that's what we have now with Obamacare. Like, isn't it? I mean,
I guess, yeah. In some
except
ways.
you can, I mean, except, you know, that stuff is expensive. Like that's more expensive than what, you know, what
Well,
most people can afford.
In Germany, the public option is cheaper.
Right.
That's why most people choose it. And it does compete with the private. So it's theoretically, it keeps the cost down.
Right.
But I'm not an economist or anything like
Right.
that. But yeah, I mean, they have a lot of social services. They have a lot of government assistance. But if you don't want that, that's what I'm saying. Like,
There's no other choices.
yeah. Like, what if I do want to go out and create something and start a business and do
Right.
this and create a bunch of jobs, and where thousands of people can work for me and they can make a living and they can have, you know, self-determination. What if I do want to do that?
Right.
Oh, you have to go through all this bureaucracy just to even start a company? You know what? Forget it. And then I get taxed all to hell? No,
Right.
just forget it.
So no boss bay in Germany, huh?
Not a lot of boss babes.
Yeah.
But that's the reality. And a lot of people in the United States just kind of see like Western Europe as like America Light or something.
Right.
It's like America, they speak a different language. It's like, no, the way they see economics, the way they see lifestyle, like in my opinion, we see a lot of Europeans like, oh, they live simpler lives.
Right.
Right. But there's a reason why.
Right.
They can't afford to live.
They
any other
can't
way.
do anything else.
Oh, they get 6 weeks of vacation. And I used to fall for that. They get 6 weeks of vacation. Why can't
Aren't
we
they
have
forced to though? Aren't they forced to take 6 weeks of vacation?
Yes.
Yeah.
that? Well, every country's different. France is 6. I think Germany's 5. But every company has to give you that. That's
And you
the
have to
minimum.
take off. You can't just opt out of that.
I believe so. I
Right.
believe so. Like there's no like rollover or anything
Right.
like that. So I believe you have to take the time. And that sounds great, right? Man, you know how many things I would do for 6 weeks of vacation?
Yeah.
But the problem is you don't make enough to do.
That's what I was going to say. You go hungry.
Right.
Some people would go hungry
Right,
with 6 weeks of forced vacation.
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, granted, it's paid, you know,
Well, I mean,
but what I'm saying is when we think of vacation, we take our 2 weeks of vacation, or if you're lucky, you get more, and you go somewhere,
right.
right? But that's because you can go on that one vacation. If
Right.
you don't make that much and
You
the
can't even
government
do
subsidizes
anything.
things,
Yeah,
you
you
can't do
can't
it.
even do anything. So even if, I see what you're saying. So even if you get paid, you still don't have enough. It's just taking care of bills. Like
Exactly.
you don't have any
Everyone's like,
extra. Yeah.
Everyone's basically here at the same
Yeah.
level. And that's what I'm saying.
State-sanctioned mediocrity.
Exactly. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Everything is incentivized for you not to go past that point.
Sure.
Or disincentivized from going, however you ever want to look
Yeah.
at it. But that's the thing where I'm just like, man, it's amazing here. I can start a business in 15 minutes, the IRS,
No kidding. Yeah.
and I can succeed and I can fail.
Right.
True freedom allows you the ability to fail.
Right.
And that's true freedom. And a lot of people think, oh, it didn't work out for them. I was like, yeah, this is the cost of freedom.
That's the risk.
That's the risk.
That's the risk. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate. I do appreciate failure because I've learned from failing. All tips and types. You talk to millionaires, they're like, oh yeah, my first 2 businesses failed.
Right.
This one worked out.
Yeah.
And they learn all these lessons along the way. That's how you learn. That's how you grow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I know we're deviating a little bit from
I no, but that's good though. Like I think I remember talking to a Canadian, and he was like, I don't know why we don't focus on. I mean, if we're talking about America, why don't we focus on the best part of America, which is the economy?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's extremely insulting. The best part of America is freedom.
Mm.
That's why we have the economy. We have the freedom to go as far as we want to. And even if we work hard, we could still fail. And that's the risk. That's part of the gamble. That's part of why it's exciting.
Right.
That's part of what makes it fun, is that if you go out there and you do it and you succeed, then you've got this grit that you can be proud of, that you can aspire to.
Yeah.
And you can inspire others to do so as well. It's like, I mean, and I talk about this with my parents. Our children are lacking purpose.
Yes. And
one of the reasons I feel like so many of our children are lacking purpose is because the indoctrination, it doesn't just indoctrinate them to segregate themselves by their victimhood status or through their perceived gender or whatever. But it also, I mean, there's also this lack of patriotism that I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be patriotism, but that's what it was before.
Mm-hmm.
But this experiment, right? This life we're living here as Americans, it's spectacular. It is something, and we shouldn't be denying that it is, that it isn't, because otherwise all of these people would not be wanting to come over here, like you said earlier.
All right.
And I think that understanding and being proud of this and doing everything we can to keep it perpetuating throughout generations, I think that is something that we should start doing again. I think there are some legislators who are actually trying to, put that in their state legislation for their education boards and things like that to kind of teach patriotism, if you, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, well, at the very least, stop demonizing patriotism.
Right.
Because there is something about the American spirit that other countries just don't have, that unbridled freedom that, a lot of us want to experience all the time.
Right.
I feel like I kind of feel weird about feeling freer than most people, but I do feel freer than most people. I say whatever I want to say. I talk all kinds of, you know what I mean? I'm wild. And if somebody doesn't like me because of it, well, I just don't care.
Right.
And I think that that's one of those things that is singular. As an American, I can do that. I might have to suffer the consequences of not having friends, or this person doesn't want to be my friend or whatever. But yeah, I don't care. I'd rather be around people who are fearless. I would rather be around people who have that, American grit and passion for it, whether they came here to experience it or they were born here and live it.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. But we're nearing the end.
Sure. That was delicious. It was
actually
good.
Looked pretty good.
It was very good. It had a nice little glaze on it. It was good. I'm usually not, super crazy about Brussels sprouts, but it was tasty.
If you do it right, it's delicious.
It is.
It is delicious. Yeah, so we're nearing the end. I always ask a final question. Are you optimistic about the future?
Yes. Yes, I am. In the macro sense, we've been here for billions of years. We'll be here for billions more, I guess. But immediately, yes. I see so much of what we've been experiencing over the past probably 10 years, this decline in our society, this decline in our civilization. I'm seeing some real changes in people waking up to the crazy and waking up and saying, you know what, this is what happened to the Romans. Let's not let this happen to us too. And I'm seeing that in all areas. And I think that the elites who have made our beds are saying, you know what, we're in the minority here, y'all. The regular people are about to rise up. Do we really want to ride this train? I think they're seeing that. And I think a lot of them are starting to realize, maybe we made a little bit of a mistake. Let's see how we can back that train up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm optimistic about the future.
Good. I'm always optimistic. I am realistic, but I'm also optimistic.
Sure.
I was just talking last night about, I believe even though we have all this darkness that's going on, even the very thing that you're fighting against, the UK banned it.
Sure.
The puberty blockers for kids.
Yeah.
Right. Just a couple of years ago, we were like, man, this is it. Like,
right.
This is going to be the way things are. And here they are. It's gone. And that's just one country. What's going to happen in the United States? Could it follow that same direction? I think the UK gives it a possibility.
I'm going to ruin the gender industry in America.
Listen, all the praise to you.
I am.
But I'm even more so. I see people like you. I see people from other organizations, individuals speaking out who are less afraid than maybe a couple of years ago, because one, you were willing to stick your neck out there.
Sure.
Maybe when it wasn't as popular, and now it's becoming more socially acceptable to question it. People are less afraid of being called a transphobe,
right,
for wanting to protect their kids. And so the more of these people who stick their neck out and say the thing and do the work and support the people who are doing it, I think it's inevitable that we'll go in the direction of the United Kingdom.
Well, I think that it's something else. I think that enough people are going to get sued. Which I find lawyers for people, right?
Right.
So I find lawyers for people. So the ideology may still remain.
Right.
But enough people are going to get sued. There's already insurance companies that are backing off and saying, I'm not going to insure you.
Right.
Because, if you practice gender affirming care, I'm sorry, we can't do it.
See, that's actually, I was saying this 3 years ago. I was like, the only way forward, because listen, if you got some radical doctor, radical teacher, radical this, they're not going to just like change on their own. Like, I'm sure some people change, people can change, but that's not how this is stopping.
Yeah.
It's stopping because you threaten their money.
Right.
And the best way
this is America after all.
Right.
Yeah, this is the suit they draws off.
We might have communists, or they're comfortable communists.
Right. And they may be communists, but their bosses are not.
Right.
And I think that's what, and this is one of the reasons why, I started ARC, right? Because we see so much of what's going on in Europe, but America has some very unique problems. And they have a very unique perspective on all of this. So no, everything that happened with the cast review and Tavistock and all of that stuff, that's all fine and good, but that ain't how it's gonna go here. That's not how it's gonna go down in America. America, you better threaten that money.
Yeah.
Yeah. You better sue somebody draws off. Yeah, I say it every day. And when you do that, they're gonna have a change of heart.
Right.
Yeah. But that's what that's why America is different. They're just they feel just as strongly about their views as I do about mine.
Right.
And so we're going to see who's right in court.
That's the way to go. No, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad you're fighting back and you're supporting regular people who are trying to save their kids. And I think there's something admirable about that. So kudos to you for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was lovely.
Yes. Yeah, because I know we were both hungry.
I know, I was starving. Been up since like 4 o'clock this morning. I was hungry.
It's all good. But once again, thank you for coming all the way to Atlanta, sit down with me here. And obviously, we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. You've been a gracious host. Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure.